to Emily Trump.
Hi there, this is Emily. I see Natasha is here with us. If you have any questions, feel free to jump in via the chat box or on the phone line. Hi there, this is Emily. I just wanted to check in again. We're open for any questions you have on small business underwriting. Feel free to use the chat box or the phone line. Thanks. I see we have a question from Francis asking, do we have a template to share on how to qualify clients? We do have some samples of risk rating forms, which I think is what you're asking about, using various ratios, credit score, collateral criteria. And we'll include that in the Dropbox that's going to be updated here in the coming days. Hi there, Fancy Sun. Glad you could join us today. This is Emily. We are open for any questions, either over the phone or the chat box, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. All right, Fancy Son has a question. To determine points for loan loss reserves, what are the evaluation factors that are used in the chart to determine a point? So every CDFI is going to develop their own scoring matrix, and we will share a sample of that in our Dropbox, as Francis was asking about earlier. Each scoring system is going to sort of lay out what qualifies at each scoring level. Generally, those scoring criteria are going to map to one or more of the 5 or 6 or 7 C's of credit that we discussed. So if you have questions about a particular rating system, or maybe something that's in use at your CDFI, happy to talk about that in more detail. Okay, Fancy Son has another question. What type of software is out there that can spread financials or underwrite for business loans? I'll be honest, I am not familiar with the software that's available. I found that most of our native CDFIs are sort of going on their own on this one. I always spread financials in Excel. That is maybe not as slick or as easy to use as some commercial software, but it is really cheap, especially if you want to use a free alternative like Google Sheets instead of Microsoft Excel. If anyone here uses a type of software to spread their financials or do underwriting, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on that. Hi, Janelle. Glad you could join us. This is Emily. Feel free to ask questions on the phone line or in the chat box if you're more comfortable.
Hello?
Hi, this is Emily.
Hi, Emily. This is Janelle.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Hey, sorry, I was on the other line, so I'm a little bit late to the work session here.
That's all right. Did you have any questions on small business underwriting?
Yeah. So I I was looking at some of the slides that you had sent yesterday, and we have with the underwriting review. And so when you were mentioning, I was thinking the other C that you mentioned as far as for cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, because each industry is different, or if they're seasonal. So say for instance, like we have a rancher or a fisherman apply, and looking at those cash flow statements, is there a certain standard um, when we had some assistance from another loan underwriter for business, is that they had like a banking kind of a rules book on best practice in doing loan underwriting. So without having to go through the full, like a bank training, which might be helpful in what we're considering
Mm-hmm.
for doing business loan underwriting. Do you guys have any best practices?
Well, I don't know that we have a certain best practice we can recommend, but usually when people are looking at cash flow, they're looking at a debt to income ratio. And some
Okay.
CDFIs I see there's a debt to income ratio for business lending where they're just not willing to lend at that point. If the
Mm-hmm.
debt to income is not at least a minimum percentage, um, like a mortgage lender would. There's going to be a requirement that it be a minimum of 35% or something. Others just
Yeah.
incorporate that as part of their scoring system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's part of me that says having a hard cutoff is sometimes too severe. You'd want to take into account other factors. But if a CDFI says they have a hard cutoff and that's working for them, I'm also not critical of that. I think you can do it both ways.
Yeah. So, and looking at maybe it's like with the projections, and looking at depreciation, because we have some standards based in our loan agreement forms and how we look at doing the risk rating system. Um, what are some other things that we need to consider? Let's see, we have. I just had to look at our current form. So there's the risk rating form. We have our agreement, and then a checklist, security agreement, and kind of a closing checklist. Um, business annual check-in. So things to measure like milestones, tax returns, insurance. What are some good things? What I'm trying to do is try to figure out, okay, what's the best methods for underwriting, but then also maintaining those relationships. Because what we get a lot of is people that are interested in business and say they're not quite there yet, so they either want to do like a credit builder loan,
Mhm.
or they decide to change directions. The other is, like they can't quite get those financial projections, and doing the estimating for that. Um, what I'm trying to do is figure out like what is the best way maybe for for a micro, like a micro business loan, something that can be fast tracked. And then we have like our bigger, more sophisticated, loan requests that maybe they're looking at purchasing property or expanding their business. Um, just for me, that's not like my specialty area, so I'm still learning. So, will you
Sure.
guys be having any more trainings on that?
Not as part of this program, but we're always trying to offer additional trainings, and you can always give us a call or send us an email um, with questions. I do think,
Okay.
to your point about micro enterprise, oftentimes at the really low end of the spectrum, where we're talking about a $5,000 or $10,000 loan, it's typical for CDFIs to underwrite those the same way you would a credit builder loan, to
Mhm.
say, we're not going to look at the business cash flow, because often the business cash flow is just really uncertain at
Yeah.
that level of business and at that level of development. And the entrepreneur is not really equipped to go produce fancy financials anyway. You don't want to kind of waste their time with that. So you
Yeah.
say to
And
them,
that's
well, if
where.
you're willing to, if you have another source of income, if you have a job or Social Security payments you're receiving, a pension or something, we're going to take that into account and look at it from, can you afford this loan out of
That
your
payment.
personal income?
Okay.
Um,
And that's because that's where I have a couple kind of, the micro, and, creating those projections is the hardest thing for them.
yeah,
And that's where I was leaning towards, is like, okay, well, what's your income right now? And that's what we'll consider. Holding them the projections, and they're like, well, what if I don't make enough? And, I don't want to put wrong information. So they want to make sure that they're accurate. But I definitely get where you're coming from.
yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, if you're just looking at their existing income, you're being more conservative, right?
Hmm.
Um, the business projections, the idea is you'd be able to take into account the additional income they're going to have from their business.
Yeah.
So that would make a loan look stronger if you had good projections you felt okay about. Um, the only place I'd caution you there of only looking at personal income and not looking at the business is if the business is going to have significant costs to the entrepreneur outside of the loan payments, you need to make sure that they're going to be able to afford those as well. And
Yeah.
that's why you're asking them to do projections, because you know one piece of their financials. You know their current income, and you know the loan payment that you're going to expect from them. But
Hmm.
you're trying to understand what other commitments are they going to have if we give them this loan. Um,
Yeah.
if somebody is
Okay.
they're just proposing to do service work on the side, they're not going to have to reduce their current hours at work, and they're not going to have to buy a lot of expensive equipment. They just need the loan that they've asked for from you to purchase equipment or inventory or something. Um, then they're probably not going to have big business expenses right up front that you have to take into account in some kind of complicated cash flow. But I'd just use your best judgment there. Instead of asking them to produce financial statements, ask them to write a couple sentences or describe to you in conversation what they think their expenses are going to be and what they think their income is going to be
Okay.
from business.
Yeah, yeah, and that's totally easy. So, and then that would just be just to document that, right? And then include that conversation as how they develop and work towards close. Like I guess part of the packaging for the underwriting, um, and how they plan on using that. The other
Right.
thing is like the full business plan, because with our policy, I mean, they talk about having like a full business plan, and for some of the like the smaller business startup, maybe the crafters, those are all different. And so what I found out is like as growing into the fund and offering the business loan, is that a business plan is different,
Mm-hmm.
and the level and the sophistication of a plan is unique to each entrepreneur and their level of where their growth. So do you have any tips on that?
Well, I think you've already got the right idea that you
Okay.
want to require a business plan that is the right size for the business you're talking about and the loan size that you're talking about. So a real simplified business plan probably has a lot of the same elements of a fully developed one. It has estimates of expenses and revenue. It has a description of how they're going to market, what their competition is, that sort of thing. But it's just going to be way more simplified. You're not asking them to do a full market study. You're just asking them to say, here's where I'm going to sell the things I'm going to make. This is what I've
Hmm.
done in the past. This is what I think is going to work.
Yeah.
And not turn it into a 10-page essay about their business. That's not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, those are some good tips. Um, that way I can try to simplify the process, because before it was just like, nope, they need this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a full application. But I think if we were able to customize and, for each person, it's, I mean, you have the guidance, right? But you're able to work with the individual entrepreneur. Okay. All right. That helped. That helps my argument.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to put myself in listen mode, and then I may type in some more questions. Um, let's see. I guess as we grow, I'm going to be working with Crystal on some other kind of micro enterprise business, growth and development. So that's
Right.
to yeah to be determined. Great. Okay. Thanks, Emily.
You're welcome. All right, so we're getting towards the end of the time we have allotted here. But before we wrap up at 2 Eastern, I'd like to ask if anybody has any more questions or concerns we can discuss here. Janelle has a comment here, business loans by type, ag, artist, natural resource, meaning fishing. I welcome your thoughts on that, Jonelle, but I will note it is common for native CDFIs to have some different underwriting criteria for different types of loans. There's no requirement that you divide up your loans that way, but sometimes ag loans need a special consideration on what their payment timing should be when the loans are being structured. Artist loan, you may want to put particular emphasis on the marketing plan, things like that. And a lot of times those types are just differentiated within the portfolio so that you can monitor your overall risk to a particular type of loan. So if you're really concentrated in the fishing industry, it's useful to track those loans separately, even if the underwriting is not terribly different, just so that you're monitoring that concentration risk. Janelle says, is it okay to expand in our loan policy on loan type or a specific loan policy for each? You don't need a specific loan policy for each. I'd just take a look at your existing policy and see if there are any tweaks you need to make to accommodate any new products or new business loan purposes, which is really what I see in your previous comment. Those are all business loans. They're just different sector. So there's no need to have a separate policy for each one. All right, well, we've reached the end of our time here, so we're going to wrap up. I want to thank everyone for attending and participating, and remind you to please give me a call or email if you have any questions, and you can look out for the recording of this and our other presentations coming out fairly soon. Thank you all, and I'll talk to you later.